So Shabbat Shalom again to those of you who've joined us or joined us online. Last week, I had the honor of being officiating at the Brit Milah, just the naming part, let me be clear, of a sweet baby boy born in our community. And in a nod to the many parts of his parents' heritage, he was named in Mizrahi tradition for a living relative, a great-grandfather who proudly stood next to Elijah's chair, and also in Ashkenazi tradition for a deceased great-grandfather. And as I watched these proud new parents looking at this little tiny being, I remembered being in their place. And I remember thinking about what qualities I hoped my child and then my other child would have. And I remember imagining who he might become. And I'm looking at you, Marla and Arash, and I know you're also thinking, right, to when Addison was just this big, right? And now you get the pleasure of celebrating her as the person she's becoming. And so I think about naming. I think about it a lot because I love names, but naming is at the heart of this week's Parsha, VaYishlach. You know this. It is the next in the narrative of Jacob's life. And we encounter him at the beginning of this Parsha in a really powerful moment, a time of great personal anxiety. Having sent his family on ahead, he finds himself alone by the banks of a river, which, by the way, in our tradition, it's supposed to signify something's going to happen here, signpost. He's anticipating this next day's encounter with his estranged brother, the one that he tricked and has not seen since he fled their family home. And just as on the first night that he left home, Jacob has this middle-of-the-night encounter that changes the way he sees the world and perhaps himself. So we read, Jacob was left alone, and a figure wrestled with him until the break of dawn. Vayar ki lo yachol lo. And when he saw he had not prevailed against him, he wrenched Jacob's hip at his socket, so that the socket of his hip was strained as he wrestled with him. He said, "Let me go, for dawn is breaking." Vayomer lo ashalechecha ki im verachtani. But he answered, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Just a note on the Hebrew, it's, I think, meant to be confusing. It's never quite clear as you read it who the he is in each moment. We're never sure who's doing the wrenching and who's doing the asking and who's doing the blessing until now. The moment of blessing arrives. Said the other, "What is your name?" And he replied, Jacob. Vayomer lo Yaakov yamar od shimcha. He said, your name shall no longer be Jacob. Ki im Yisrael, ki sarita im Elohim ve'im anashim v'tuchal, but Israel, for you have striven with beings human and divine and have prevailed. It's a sort of incredible moment, and it's the one that gives rise to Jacob's identity as the ancestor of the people Israel. He becomes, in this moment, our eternal namesake. But before that, maybe before he becomes this symbolic Israel, perhaps we're supposed to know that Jacob has a chance to remake himself, to be known finally as either someone new or just the person that he truly is. He has the opportunity perhaps to acknowledge the ways that he has grown and changed in those years since he last saw his brother. He has become a husband, a father, a successful businessman. This is the Jacob that our commentator Rashi sees when he suggests that the name change tells Jacob that it'll no longer be said that the blessings you have came to you through supplanting and subtlety, but through noble conduct and in an open manner. I read a teaching by someone named Ami Silver who wrote, it seems that the shift from Yaakov to Israel is much more than a name change. It is a transformation of his identity. But he's about to see his brother, who knows and remembers him only as that baby brother, the trickster who stole his birthright and his blessing. Or maybe imagine he's, say, going to his high school reunion, where so many years later he's suddenly just the jock again. Or sitting around the Passover table where he was always and is still seen as the wicked child. I turned back in my mind to some childhood favorites, and the 1980s classic The Breakfast Club plays with this same idea. It opens with these words. You know the monologue. You can hear the music. Dear Mr. Vernon, we accept the fact that we had to sacrifice a whole Saturday in detention for whatever it was we did wrong. What we did was wrong, but we think you're crazy to make us write an essay telling you who we think we are. What do you care? You see us as you want to see us, in the simplest terms, the most convenient definitions. You see us as a brain, an athlete, a basket case princess, and a criminal. Correct? That's the way we saw each other at 7 o'clock this morning. So with my Jacob in 5th grade now, I often find myself talking, I was just doing it this week, about middle school with other parents. And just this week, Kevin can attest, I was sitting with a 6th grade parent and we were talking about her daughter, and she was expressing her hope that they're able to find a school where she can flourish and be her fullest self. We talked together about the hope and possibility of reinvention, of getting to try on new passions and new identities, and being in a place that accepts us for all that we are. So the Breakfast Club ends with this monologue. Dear Mr. Vernon, we accept the fact that we had to sacrifice a whole Saturday in detention for whatever it was we did wrong. But we think you're crazy to make us write an essay telling you who we think we are. You see us as you want to see us, in the simplest terms, in the most convenient definitions. But what we found out is that each one of us is a brain, and an athlete, and a basket case, and a princess, and a criminal. These characters, like our ancestral Jacob, and like us, I think, if we're thoughtful and lucky and also seen, understand their own complexities, the ability to hold multiple identities and also to become different or change from who we were. Years ago, I was introduced to this concept of identity voting, which, by the way, don't get anxious, has nothing to do with exit polls or partisan politics. It's actually an idea that if you believe yourself to be something, a runner, a writer, a present parent, a loyal friend, then with each act that you do towards that identity, so lacing up your running shoes, sitting down in front of that blank page, putting down your phone when you get home, whatever that is, you are voting to be that person. And while you can start this at any time, the new year coming up, it's not so far in the horizon, seems like a good, if arbitrary, time to start. So I'm going to invite you in this parasha of naming and renaming to ask yourself, if you were to stand at your high school reunion or when you are ready to sit at the Passover table, how do you want to be seen? And then, how can you start to vote yourself towards that identity? Rabbi Menachem Creditor, a teacher and a colleague, asked similar questions based on Jacob's story. He writes, what's your name? Who are you? What part of your past remains with you, and how might they help you grow? He says, in a world where we wrestle with uncertainty, fear, and hope, these questions are gifts, inviting us to embrace transformation, to carry our past with purpose, and to move toward the future with strength and awareness. So in this nighttime encounter, Jacob asks for a blessing and is given a new name. At birth, he is named in relation to his brother. He is the grasper, Yaakov, striving for something he may never achieve. And now, these many years later, he's solid and he's strong. He's able to wrestle with his angels and his demons and prevail. The angel reveals something powerful to Jacob in that moment, and it's not just a new name. The angel tells him that change is not only possible, but that it can actually be seen and it can be acknowledged. Perhaps the blessing is not the new name itself then, but rather that angel who sees the change in them, who sees Jacob as he is now, acknowledging his work and his growth. This blessing then allows Jacob to see himself that way. And so maybe the blessing that the angel gives Jacob is that of self-knowledge, of being sure or at least comfortable in who he is. So here we are in mid-December, drawing closer to the end of our secular year. While we're mostly inundated with Christmas commercials and sales, we're not too far off from those promises of the new year, right? New year, new me. And as I've shared before, to me, there's always something appealing about the secular new year, that concept of a fresh start, the idealism of goals and resolutions, maybe revolutions, I don't know. The simplicity and possibility of something brand new. And so maybe this week is a reminder that leaning into our growth, into our aspirations and possibilities might indeed move us forward. This Shabbat, we honor Jacob's becoming. Rabbi Eve Posen also writes about this transformation, noting the ways that he still remains Jacob throughout his life, even after his name changes. She says the Torah goes back and forth between calling Jacob by his name and using Israel, the one who wrestles with God. And she points out, interestingly, that he is called both at the passing of his beloved wife, Rachel. In that moment, he is both the little boy who's born holding on to his brother and the grown man wrestling with the reality of the world. Each of us carries our stories with us, and who we are today reflects who we were yesterday. Rabbi Creditor continues, because even as we grow, the past remains within us. Who we once were doesn't vanish. It becomes part of who we are becoming. So one of the selves that my son is becoming is a musical theater lover. And so I couldn't close without an allusion, at least, to Wicked, which has sort of consumed our entire household. I don't know how many of you have seen it, but there's a lot of Wicked in our house right now. And without any spoilers, because I know only the first half of the movie came out, at the end of the show, which I just saw for the first time, so it was basically a spoiler to me too, right? At the end of the show, these two main characters, these two friends, meet for the last time. Similar, by the way, to Jacob and Esau, who come together in this moment and then part, we think, forever. And they sing this song. Some of you know it. I know we got to hear it a couple weeks ago. And there's this line that has just been like rolling around in my head as I was thinking about this transformation, where they say, I don't know if I've been changed for the better, but because I knew you, I have been changed for good, right? And we're supposed to catch that illusion, right? We're supposed to catch that it might be changed for good, meaning it was a good change, and it's supposed to remind us that it's forever, right? That change is forever. And so I want to name in this moment too, Jacob. We don't know if he's changed for the better yet, right? We don't know what the new name signifies. We don't know what his story is going to be. And we know as he limps away that he is changed for good, that it is a transformational moment. And so Rabbi Creditor's blessing for this week, he says, may we, like Jacob, find the courage to wrestle, and may we, like Israel, emerge transformed. And I'm going to add to that as we go into this season of resolutions and change and trying something new. I'm going to add that my blessing is that we are changed both for the better and for good. Shabbat shalom.